This is a task for the city
Okay, let's go ahead and call to order the January 5th, 2023 meeting of the Historic Preservation Board. Do we have an invocation? Mr. Sheffield, would you like to? Thank you, sir.
If we can stand, please. Father, we thank you for a new year. And we ask that you would be present with us in this meeting, Father, that we may govern, make decisions with wisdom in a manner that you would have us do for the betterment of your people in the city of Palatka. We thank you for every member, and we especially thank you for every citizen that's reaching out, Father, to comply and enrich our community. We ask your blessing upon us all. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. If we would continue to stand, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. If we could, please, the roll call
Thank you, Madam Chair. Elizabeth Van Rensburg.
here.
Larry Beaton is an excused absence for the record. Christopher Hollister.
Present.
Diana Pierce. Present. Patty Blair. Present. Alan Sheffield. And Clifton Baradell is not present for the record.
Thank you very much. Thank you. The next item is something that thrills me and saddens me at the same time, because Linda Little, Crable, and I have been on this board for so many years together, and I will miss you sitting beside me. I'll miss sharing my candy with you. And I won't miss your friendship because I know it will continue. We have a little something for you to honor you, Linda, for your 17. I know, I should have done it. And please silence your cell phones. To honor you as as a 17+ year member of the Historic Preservation Board. May I give this to you? And Linda, this is not for me. This is from the board. Million homeowners in the, well, not probably not billion. But many homeowners in the city of London, children be calm, this is all of them. Wow, your wealth of knowledge, your love of this town. This is for you, and when everybody comes down, we'll take a photo. I've so enjoyed your friendship.
Ready? Ready, set, and cheese, and cheese, and cheese.
Congratulations. Thank you. And y'all, I'd like to say, y'all continue with the good work. It's been a wonderful pleasure to be a part of this and to add whatever knowledge I have. As I said, my family's been here since 1946, so I have. Oh, sorry. So anyway, I just want to thank you, and I've enjoyed it. Like I said, my family's been here since 1946, so I have a lot of history here. And I'd like to make sure that we continue to appreciate our history. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, the appeals procedure. Let me go ahead and read that. Any person wishing to appeal any decision made by the Historic Preservation Board with respect to any matter considered at such meeting will need a record of the proceedings, and for such purpose may need to ensure that a verbatim record of the proceedings is made, which record includes the testimony and evidence upon which the appeal is to be based. Florida statute 286.0105. Ex parte communication. Ladies and gentlemen, anything to declare? Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 2 on our agenda, which is the approval of minutes of the December 1st, 2022 Historic Preservation Board meeting. I believe we've all had time to look these over. Are there any corrections or adjustments? If not, I'm looking for a motion to approve. Thank you very much. Moving on to the public comment. Oh, I'm so sorry. Motion to approve. Thank you, Patty.
All in favor, say aye.
You know, it's always something different, but I always manage. I swear I practice at home in front of the mirror, but it doesn't work. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed.
And Madam Chair, I don't know if now is the time, but I believe item 1E was skipped.
Oh. Wow. Okay, item 1E is the selection of the chairman and vice chairman for the Historic Preservation Board for 2023. I don't know if I can say that I would like to continue to serve as your chairman if it is your will and your wish. I would imagine that if so, a nomination.
I'll make a nomination to continue as chair for 2023.
Thank you. You have great faith. We have a motion and a second that I continue as our chairman. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed. Thank you very much for your trust in me. On the subject of vice chair, may I make a nomination? Is that I would like to nominate Mr. Sheffield to be the vice chair of the Historic Preservation Board. Thank you very much. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed. Yeah, come on. Come sit by me. I'll give you a crunch bar.
Okay.
Mr. Hollister, I attempted to give you a crunch bar earlier. All right, moving on in the agenda. And by the way, thank you very much for serving. Moving on in the agenda to public comments. Please note that speakers are limited to 3 minutes and we will not take action on items. We would like to know, please, who you are and what your address is. And I would like to open the public comment section of the meeting. I do have one speaker card from Allegra Kitchens. Good afternoon, madam.
Good afternoon, Board. Allegra Kitchens, 1027 South 12th Street, Palatka, Florida. I couldn't pass up this opportunity to praise Linda Craybill and thank her for her service on the board. I had the very great honor of meeting Linda for the first time in 2005, and we both were running for city commission. We became good friends, and she's a great person, and I'm very sorry to see her retire, and I hope that some of us can talk her into serving on another board somewhere. But Linda's a great person to work with. She's a great citizen. She knows Palatka very well. She loves Palatka. And I just wanted to add my thanks to her years of service and to her for being such a good friend, not only to me, but to the city of Palatka.
Thank you very much. All right, do we have anyone else for public comments? If not, we will close the public comment section of our meeting and move on to item 4 on our agenda, which is regular business. Item A is HPB case 22-31, request for a certificate of appropriateness for a metal roof at 315 Kirkland Street. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you mentioned, this is application to remove an existing shingle roof and replace it with a metal roof. It's been a very common application here in the city, request in the city. I understand that, well, I know for certain actually that last month it was presented to you, but we tabled it until this month. because we wanted to hear from the applicant and look at an actual sample of the proposed material.
Absolutely. And we appreciate the applicant's understanding that we were just a little bit confused and wanted more information. I hope that sample is here today and we can have a peek at it. In the meantime, the applicant, I believe, is with us today. Hi, applicant. Would you like to come and speak to us? You don't have to, but we'd love to hear from you.
Is the microphone on, Madam Chair?
How about now?
And identify.
So it it's been around the bed of my truck. Standard metal roof. We put about 300 of these on a year, not in the city of Palaca, but all over the east side of Florida. Very standard. I think each neighbor on each side of him has the same exact panel. We have done quite a few of this same panel in the historical district. Never had a problem with it, but I know the little picture. Kind of hard to see. And looking at little specs, we thought we were gonna be able to submit y'all where we go through. Evidently that didn't work out very well, but we're here with this. That's what the profile looks like. It's got down from actual panel size. Here's something like that.
Thank you very much. Honestly, the picture didn't look a thing like that
Yeah,
being just a standard aluminum galvalume.
That is panel. Nothing. Maybe I'm not sure what this. Yeah, it looks a little different than that. But it's a galvalume metal panel. They all look the same.
Absolutely. I think the board was thinking frankly that it would be beige. Or, yeah,
And no, it's galvalume. That's the actual, what they call this color. It's a galvalume panel. You get into color, it's a painted panel, and they'll be specific on the color. So, but that's what we're submitting. That's what we're wanting to be approved, so we can continue with the permitting process, so we can put a brand new metal roof on this historic home.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you coming to see us and we really appreciate you kind of clearing it up. You're absolutely correct. That is about as standard a galvalume piece of metal as it comes.
Madam Chair, he said he was here present for the applicant.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm Charles Smith, 182 West River Road, Palaca, Florida. Here in Blue Sky Roof in North Florida.
Thank you.
At our last meeting, I believe it was called into question whether or not the contractors for the project had the proper certification that they needed to have. I personally trust that city staff would have established this, so there's no reason really to dwell on the matter.
Correct.
Fantastic. Then let's see what our board thinks about this application.
And I'll second.
Fantastic. We have a motion and a second to approve. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed. Fantastic. Passes.
Was there anyone from the public that wished to speak regarding this case?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Would anyone like to speak to us regarding this case from the public? If not, we will move ahead, and sounds as though we are in agreement that this is the best thing to do for the property. And thank you very much. Moving on to the next item of order on the agenda, which is number 5, and that is staff presentations. I understand that we are going to be getting an overview and a bit of a workshop, and I think that's a great idea.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to speak with you guys regarding the sunshine law. Ironically, sunny sunshine, I always get a kick out of that. I will ask you to bear with me if you would. The doctor cleared me to be with you today, but I am recovering from laryngitis. So if my voice crackles, please forgive me. It's not my heart, it's just my vocal cords. All right, so we're gonna go to the first slide, and this is a lengthy presentation. It's actually put together by the Attorney General Ashley Moody, our last Attorney General. So I'm just gonna cover the main highlights of it. If you have any questions, I'm happy to go through them with you guys. But it's kind of a lengthy presentation, so I'm gonna kind of just hit the key points. All right, so the Sunshine Law, it's what provides our public a right of access to government proceedings at both the state and the local levels. It involves when two or more members of any governing body comes together to meet regarding some type of action. A lot of times the Florida League of Cities summarizes this slide by saying where two or more people or board members are gathered, there the Sunshine Law is in the midst. So that's kind of an easy way of remembering the Sunshine Law. It's whenever two or more members are gathered. Board members cannot engage in private discussions with each other about any matter that is to become before the board. So this is period. This is telephoning, emailing, texting, any type of communication, Facebook, blogs. I've even seen some opinions from the Attorney General and other people that was going into saying that if someone comments on a Facebook page, hey, I'm in agreement, so I'm going to vote yes to them. Then that is a violation of the Sunshine Law because that is a public post and other people can see it, and other board members can see it. So you got to be very, so that's why Facebook and social media is included in the Sunshine Law. Of course, this isn't to say that you can't speak with city staff. City staff or the staff of the governing body is there to support you and help you reach the decision. We're kind of that middleman between the applicant and you guys. But we're not going to make the decision for you. So that's why city staff is exempt from the Sunshine Law and in the discussion aspect. So there's three basic requirements of the Sunshine Law. It's saying that meetings of public boards must be open to the public. You've probably seen notices run in the newspaper, on the city's website, various places where we're announcing that this meeting is open to the public. We're also required by the Sunshine Law to provide reasonable notice of the meeting. Of course, reasonable notice is identified not only in Florida statutes, but also city code. City code talks a little bit about the notice that we must be providing. So that's how you can see that reasonable may vary between cities depending on what their codes say specifically. But as far as the main Sunshine Law, just says that reasonable notice needs to be provided. Minutes of the meeting must be prepared and are open to public inspection. Anyone's welcome to request minutes from the city clerk's office, and we do try to post them on the city's website after they've been approved. Some people may wish them before they're approved. If they wish them before they're approved and they're completed, the city attorney has instructed me to just advise the people that they're in draft status. This hasn't been an approved minute. So the Sunshine Law applies to advisory boards. It's not just the elected officials. I think you guys know that. Staff meetings are not subject to the Sunshine Law. So that's when two or more members of staff meet about an application. It's not part of the decision-making process. City staff cannot grant you an exemption to the Sunshine Law. That's only the Florida legislature. And I'm sure you guys know that that's hard to get. Yeah, that's a whole nother can of worms we can't go down. Board members may adopt reasonable rules and policies to ensure orderly conduct of the meeting. The Sunshine Law does not allow boards to ban non-disruptive videotaping, tape recording, or photography. So that's why you may see the newspaper or other media outlets come in and take pictures. They're welcome to do so because it is a public meeting. The chair can still maintain decorum, of course. Of course, there are penalties for removement from the Sunshine Law, suspension, removal of office, civil lawsuits, criminal action. Public records law, if you're wondering, this slide kind of switches here a little bit. So before we get into public records side of this, does anyone have any questions on? They can't talk to each other about an item. Okay.
Sorry. I rather know than not ask. It said prior to the decision. So after there's been a decision made, people, can they still talk amongst each other or not?
You can still talk amongst each other, but I would caution that some of the stuff that you may see from one applicant may be very, very close to the next applicant.
Okay.
May I use the example that we just had as an example? You guys know the galvanized roofs are provided to you guys fairly frequently. We're seeing a lot in the planning department. They're seeing a lot of requests to remove shingles and add roofing. So maybe you want to talk about the gentleman, the application that just left. But I would caution you guys from doing that because the next application is going to be very, very, maybe very, very similar. And someone may say, well, that's my case they're talking about. And it would be very, very difficult to say that it wasn't their case you're talking about.
Good. So it wasn't a stupid question. Thank you.
No,
it's
no,
a-
may
it's
I
a gray
also,
area.
may I also add that there is a possibility that a decision could be appealed.
Okay.
So honestly, I just wouldn't.
Right. I'm trying to make sure that I don't do what I'm not supposed to do.
Of course.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, so the public records law, which is chapter 119 of Florida statutes, allows state and local governments to provide public record access to the public. And you may be wondering what exactly is a public record? To make it brief, folks, it's anything. It's text messaging, it's books, it's videotapes, it's photographs, it's agendas, it's not, of course, minutes. We talked about that, but it's electronic communication. I'm just giving an example, on a real world example. Say you did post something on Facebook, hey, great job to that last applicant, whatever. We may then get a social media outlet or a member of the public saying, hey, I want a copy of that Facebook post. So then I would then in turn ask you guys to provide that Facebook post, or the city attorney would ask you to provide that Facebook post as our public records liaison. So essentially it's anything, but that slide goes into a bit more detail. We can't withhold public records requests. Requester doesn't have to confirm that it's legitimate or a non-commercial interest. A request can't be denied because it's overbroad. Unless authorized by another statute, we don't have to request that they put their request in writing. They don't even have to tell us their name. The Public Records Act does not contain a specific time limit, though. When I say that we can't tell someone that it's overbroad, we can tell them it may be a very lengthy amount of time in order for us to get that back to you. Because someone wanted an extensive request of say minutes or something, it would be very detailed to pull those from archives going back to certain way. Fees, the city attorney is not present to talk about the fees that she normally charges us to the city's liaison, but I'll cover this a little bit. Chapter 119 does say that we can charge 15 cents per page. Additional 5 cents for 2-sided copies. And then of course, you can actually impose the cost of extensive labor. If something was overbroad that we can't say is overbroad, we can charge for the labor of looking into it. So sometimes like that, things are not in a timely manner just because they're very broad in scope. Retention, just to kind of give you guys a basic idea of what retention is. The state of Florida provides local governments what we call a retention schedule that says how long we're required to keep something in order for something to be discarded. We have to fill out a form with the city attorney or whoever's the record management liaison, saying that we intend to destroy something, and the records management liaison has to agree that it's legally okay to destroy that item. Because we want to make sure we're not destroying anything that's very important that our public may want in the future. All right, so for additional resources, I know we just gave kind of a brief overview of the Sunshine Law. The Attorney General's office actually has a 2-hour-long Sunshine Law presentation if you're interested to delving more into this. And as far as finding out more information about the Sunshine Law, the Sunshine Manual is found on the First Amendment Foundation website. Obviously, it's kind of a thick book, so in modern days, it's a lot easier to access it on the website, but if anyone would like me to order them a copy, I'm more than welcome to give you a physical copy of the Sunshine Manual. But sometimes it's easier to hit Control F and search for those key terms that you want. So I know the website's kind of more easy to use. Any questions on the Sunshine Law? I hear Ms. Mo.
Hi, this is Valeria Thomas. My internet service has been kind of wacky all week. But if you guys have any questions or anything like that, I am also available. And to you to answer any questions about the Sunshine Law or Public Records Act.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Sunny, for your presentation.
Welcome. I will turn it over to Ms. Walsh, who I believe is gonna hit the next item. Or am I doing parliamentary procedures?
Parliamentary procedures is next.
Click the button. Click what button?
Hit what? Now, can you take it from there or do I need to? Okay.
All right, so parliamentary procedures. Parliamentary procedures is a code of rules and ethics for working together in groups. They are to maintain the orderly, expeditious, and efficient transaction of business meetings and conventions. Of course, its purpose is to determine the will of the majority and to carry it out. Oh, can you? Parliamentary procedure definition, like page, it still thinks I'm in the left side. Thank you. Why are parliamentary procedures important? It's because every board member has the ability to make his or her position declared to the remaining members of the board to the extent that it can be tolerated in the interest of the entire body. That goes back to where we were talking about the chair can maintain quorum. Before we go on to the next slide, you'll hear later in the presentation about Robert's Rules of Order. Robert's Rules of Order is one type of parliamentary procedures. But the main definition applies to that as well. You may hear in the beginning of the meeting, we ask if there a quorum. The quorum has to be more than half of the active membership. Some of these other terms, you don't, majority and 2/3 majority, you don't hear a whole lot in the city's code, but if it does come up, a majority vote is more than a half of those voting, you'll hear that, but 2/3 majority is more than 2/3 voting. I believe that you'll hear that a lot, like in the planning board side of things, like if the commissioner rides a recommendation of planning board, it requires that 2/3 majority. So you'll hear that more in their realm. Motion is a proposal by a member to take any particular action. The agenda, I think we all know it's our flow, it's our written flow of how we get things done. Parliamentarian is our expert on parliamentary procedures, which of course is Ms. Valeria and of course the gentleman in the audience. What's the purpose of parliamentary procedures? Of course, going back to that, it's to have an effective meeting. By publishing the meeting on time, we're giving everybody an idea of what's going to come before the board. That's why an agenda is important. We call the meeting to order because we want to be respectful of everyone's time. We must maintain a quorum in order to conduct business. Without a quorum, we can't take a vote of the body. Of course, following the agenda kind of keeps everybody on flow and on target to be done in a timely manner. And of course, any agenda change requires a vote. You'll hear that a lot at the commission level. When the commission is asked by city staff to take something on as an emergency item, you'll hear that more there. Because of course, with historic preservation, there's kind of more noticing guidelines because we're actually changing something physical. Agenda creation. This is kind of staff. What are we kind of trying to do when we create an agenda? We're trying to solve a problem. Of course, in HPB, we have an application that's coming before the board and we're trying to give them an answer. What outcome do we have to achieve? Obviously, we would present what the applicant is wishing. And then it's up to you guys and to follow the code and see if that's something the city can grant. And of course, we talked about giving notice of reasonable notice in the prior presentation. And of course, we value everybody's time. This is kind of an outline of an agenda. But of course, some of this doesn't apply to HPB. Some of it does, the call to order, roll call, public comment, making sure our public has the ability to make their voice heard. Approving the minutes. You guys don't normally have a consent agenda because you're normally hearing new business. You may see staff reports or staff or board member comments at the end. And of course, in order to end the meeting, we must adjourn. Typical procedures of the board. A lot of times you may hear me like earlier, if I may use earlier, and this is an example, the applicant stated that he wasn't the applicant, but he was here representing the applicant. I didn't ask the applicant for his name. I asked the chair for permission. May I get the applicant's name for the record? I'm as people, and this is more as you, elected bodies are more formal than HPB. But I'm still asking the chair for permission to speak to the applicant. An item, of course, must be read, either usually the chair will read the item or calling up case HPB, the number requested for this. That way, everyone in the audience and the other board members, especially those that, you know, we have to be careful that there may be people in the audience that can't read the agenda due to, you know, sight, vision impairments and other things that we need to make accommodations for. So that's another good reason why we read what's the case to be coming before the board, and also lets the other board members know where we are on the agenda. And of course, the next kind of flow would be that board member will state their motion, another would second the motion. The chair would restate the motion, okay, in case anyone may have not heard it, maybe the board member didn't have their microphone on, you know, a lot of things may happen, but the chair will repeat the motion. The motion, of course, debated. You'll hear this at commission level and bodies that are more formal. You'll hear someone call for a question. That pretty much means that, you know, it's an indication to the chair that we believe that the debate is over. At that point, if it's a public hearing, obviously everything's public hearing, but at that point, if it's not something that's normally brought up like on a consent, if it's actually new business, we would open the floor typically to public comment to make sure that if anyone has a question regarding that particular item, that question or comment is heard. And then, of course, once the floor is closed for public comment, a vote would be taken. The chair announces the determination of that vote. All right, so next slide goes into Robert's Rules of Order a little bit more specifically. Do you have any questions for me so far? All right. So Robert's Rules of Order is pretty formal. You'll see that some small boards will kind of adopt their own rules. Some small boards in some cities will adopt a rule amongst themselves that they wouldn't call for a second. I don't believe that's been done here at our city, but I'm just using that as an example. Informal discussion of a subject is permitted when no motion is pending in a smaller and more informal committee. Whereas like the commission level and things that are more formal, you know, maybe a quasi judicial hearing of the zoning board of appeals or something like that, you'll hear that they actually do require that motion to be made before any discussion is given. So that's kind of where some smaller boards may adopt their own rules to be a little bit more friendly to the public. Moving on to the next slide, it talks about more about the roles of the chair. Chair must recognize anyone before they speak. The purpose of this is so that we're not all talking over each other. Of course, that's to maintain decorum, but in the days of modern technology, it's also for sound systems and for YouTube streaming. And for those reasons, can have multiple people talking over each other because the electronic system will get confused. Who's talking? And it comes out like blurbs. The chair cannot make a motion because they're acting to maintain that decorum of motions being made. And the chair votes only to make or break a tie unless the chair is a full member. Here on the Historic Preservation Board, the chair is a full member. So they can vote. A vice chair would act as the chair in the event of the absence of the chair. This kind of goes into precedent of motions. But it's more for formal bodies, but to kind of give you an outline of something that may come before you guys. If there's a motion to table on the floor, then that, or to move this item to a time and date certain of another meeting, then that motion needs to be dealt with before someone can make a motion whether to proceed. That's kind of talking about the precedence. If you know there's a board member that really wants this to be moved, we have to hear and understand why they really want it to be moved before going into other stuff. But points of order and that kind of thing are going to be a little bit more formal that you'll see on this slide. But I'm happy to answer any questions or try to from this slide if you have any questions on precedent and motions. But that's gonna kind of summarize everything. Parliamentary procedures are there to just keep us on order, on task, and get us out in a timely manner and be cautious of the time constraints of our public.
Thank you very much. I like the quiz at the end.
I originally did this little presentation when I had to go to the high school and give this to students. So we did a little quiz with the high school students. That was pretty cool. All right, seeing no questions, I will pass along the microphone to Mr. Walsh and Mr. Holmes about board member duties. If may.
Don't have a, do we have one member duties one? Just the code. Okay. Thank you, Sunny, Madam Chair. Sections 54-76 is the beginning of the Historic Preservation Board Code section. Establishes the board initially, gives that enabling legislation to do so. Gives the purpose of the board, it's to carry out the aims of the article and for preserving and enhancing the character of the districts and sites. Obviously, you guys aren't compensated other than the privilege of being on a Zoom meeting somewhere online. The board is supposed to be made up of an architect, a property owner within the North and South Historic Districts, a representative of the Putnam County Historical Society, a contractor, a real estate broker, and an attorney. Obviously, that doesn't happen all the time. There may not be someone that's willing and able to serve on the board in that capacity. And so we have to accommodate that and invite people that are willing and able to serve. The terms are addressed in the next paragraph down. Sunny, can you go down? Thank you, ma'am. As you know, we have our meetings, just the way we've been conducting them, as Sunny explained. But the majority of your duties are to hear these cases and applications that come before you for alterations or new construction or demolitions of historic properties. Is there anything further on the duty? There it goes, duties, specific duties. You have specific duties listed here to recommend to the city commission. After hearing these cases, review petitions for certificates of appropriateness, develop programs to stimulate public interest in the urban neighborhood conservation, participate in the adoption of the enabling codes. One example of that development is the application that we made last year for a grant to update the cultural resource survey for the North and South Historic Districts. That grant was awarded to the city in June. We have just put out a RFP for someone to do that for us, and the deadline for that submission for bids is January 12th. So I'll be coming back before you with some other things once that's completed and we select a contractor and it's approved by the city commission. You can advise property owners and local governmental agencies concerning the proper protection, maintenance, and enhancement and preservation of resources under this article. You can conduct regular public hearings, as we mentioned before, and that your decisions are advisory and they go before the commission once they're completed. Just check and make sure there's not anything else under here. So then there's another section about creating historic districts and sites. And how the board shall submit its recommendations. So if you approve something, you don't typically have to give a reason, but it's a good idea that you could say it's consistent with some section of the code, or you could say it's consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties with guidelines for preserving, rehabilitating, restoring, and reconstructing historic buildings. It's a big, long document, but basically the main premise of that document is if you're going to alter a building, an historic structure or site, it should be done in a like manner. So for example, if you have to make a repair to a section of a stone foundation of a building, like this building has a has a stone foundation to it. So you wouldn't want to use plastic to repair that stone. And you would want a certified mason to come in and repair that with real stone or some aggregate of material that would serve the same purpose. But you wouldn't want, again, like I said, you wouldn't want to use plastic with stone. You wouldn't want to replace a wooden door with a steel door. Yes, wood windows with vinyl windows, and I know we've done that. I can certainly see the reasons why, but I think it's, if you were following the strictest application of these standards, that would not be permitted. The code further goes on to describe the procedure for issuance of a certificate of appropriateness. So there's some things that I'm permitted to approve at the staff level here in this code, but then there's other things like the roof change that you just heard that has to come before you because it's not a like for like replacement. And if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them to the best of my ability.
Am I correct in that literally any question that would be addressed to myself personally or to our board members, our immediate reaction to that question should be, you should consult city staff? In other words, we're not out there in the public giving people our opinion. We are simply referring any questions back to the proper channels.
I think that's a good idea. I am not a certified historian or architect or anything like that, but we do have access to the Secretary of the Interior standards, and I can tell them the same things I just told you.
Would you mind stating your name and address for the record?
Yeah, but that's funny. Just a couple of points. Don Holmes, current city manager for the next couple of months. Just to mention a couple of things that over the last, I don't know, 25 years or so, I've noticed in dealing with boards. One, to your point, it's really fundamental to remember that individually, none of you have any authority at all. Your authority comes from your position and standing as a member of the group. The group has authority as defined by the code, but individually you don't. So I think that directly goes to your question, Ms. Van Rensburg, and that if someone asks you for an opinion in the public, I think you're probably putting yourself at a disadvantage if you answer, because you really don't have the authority to answer. And the risk there is that you give an answer that's either misinterpreted or you might even be wrong. And then that person relies upon that answer, and then the city takes action. And then the person says, yeah, but Ms. Van Rensburg told me that this was okay. And then that person's got a problem because you had no authority to tell them that. And so there's no estoppel that prevents the city from doing what the code says. So one. Two, a lot of, the information you're given is, I think, just intended to get to a basic goal of one, keeping order, and two, trying to help you always focus on what your job is. And that is to apply the standards that are in the code. And that sounds real simple, but we all understand that we all have opinions. Sometimes our opinions are real strong about different things. But when you're dealing with government or law, courts, theoretically at least, everyone's first focus should be, what's the standard that's established in our code? And that's the standard that should be applied, whether you like it or you don't like it. It doesn't really matter. If you don't like it, you can certainly tell staff, that there's some particular element of the code that you think's inappropriate or could be corrected or should be corrected, and then maybe if, if that is, deemed to be a valid point, it can go, it can work its way up, and maybe the ordinance has changed, But I guess the point is, even if you don't like the law, like I've told juries for a whole lot of years, even if you don't like it, you gotta apply it. Because you're not here in the capacity of making laws. That's what the commissioners ultimately do in your scenario. I don't know if it was covered, and Sonny, I don't even know what exactly you had me scheduled to speak on, but since you mentioned earlier that you wanted me to mention something about trespass and authority. So it might be interesting for you to know that even our sworn code enforcement officers don't have the authority to trespass on private property. If you're on public property, you can view what you can view from public property. Public sidewalk, if it's, it's a public sidewalk, the street, of course. You can even view things from the neighbor's yard if the neighbor gives you permission to be in the neighbor's yard. But what you can't do is go on somebody's private property without permission and conduct your own inspection. You have no authority to trespass on private property. Actually, code enforcement officer doesn't either. Actually, most cops don't have that authority unless there's some exigent circumstance or emergency or something like that they're working with, because we, fundamentally our property is our domain, and we are allowed to decide who comes on it and who doesn't. So in the course of doing what you do, I understand over the years, people have constantly asked the question of, can I go out and do my own inspection? And the answer is, there's nothing that says you can't. Sunshine law doesn't prohibit it, but the spirit of a board action is that all of you see and hear the same thing. And what you see and hear theoretically comes to you from the presentation made by staff and the people who come in and make presentations. The philosophy and the I guess the logic of that is that Mr. Sheffield may go out and look at something and see something in his personal inspection that Ms. Pierce doesn't. You come in to make a decision, and Mr. Sheffield may or may not have been accurate in what he perceived. Since Mr. Sheffield will assume that with his CPA background and his attention to details, he was. But point is that there have actually been cases where people have gone out and looked at the wrong property. Not necessarily an HPB, but I have seen it happen in planning boards over the years, where someone actually went out and looked at the wrong property and came to a board meeting then and was operating on the assumption that what they had seen was what was before the board, and it really wasn't, and everybody else was operating under the assumption that they were getting from what was being presented. So I'm not in a position, nor is anybody else in a position to tell you that you can't go out and look at property. But when you do, you have to understand you may be seeing something that none of your other board members see. And then when you come to the hearing, the question is, what are you going to do with the information that you saw that they didn't? Are you going to testify? Because testimony is made under oath and it's presented to the whole board, and theoretically it could be subject even to cross-examination in a quasi-judicial board. So it makes for a quandary. You go out and look, and that's fine, but it presents complications. Secondly, if you talk to somebody while you're out there, that's not prohibited either, but it's the next parte communication that should be revealed in the meeting, and should be revealed by you saying the context, who you talk to and what the context of that conversation was. Because if I'm coming in here as an applicant and I hear what's being presented, I make a presentation, I hear what staff says, and then you're considering my case based on something you went out and saw or heard from a neighbor who might or might not been, totally on point, then basically my case is being judged on something that I'm not privy to. And that's kind of the definition of a violation of due process, because in our country, we have a right to basically understand what facts are being viewed by the determining body and the right to challenge them if we think that they're wrong, but I can't challenge what I don't know. So as a matter of fairness, I would simply tell you that it's preferable from my standpoint if you didn't go out and look at things individually. If you depended upon staff to bring you a fair presentation, and then of course you have what's being presented by the applicant and or people in opposition, and if staff's not giving you what you think you need, then certainly, whether you do it in public or you contact Lisa in private and say, hey, I'd like better pictures, or I'd like more pictures, or I'd like to have maybe a brief summary of the rule that's being applied in the packet, in our agenda packet, for the case, so that I can look at, you know, what I'm dealing with. For instance, juries are given the jury instructions. They're literally given the jury instructions in writing to take back to the jury room and apply. Half the time they don't. That's what they're told to do. So you could certainly, and at one point in time, when you know, even here, but at the county also, we made that part of the package. You know, that's a request to determine for certificate of appropriateness, and the issue is, can they use a plastic fence instead of a wood picket fence? And here's what the standard, here's what the rules, here's what the code says. You know, this is the decision before you. And then, you know, the question should be, you know, how you apply that code. This is a pet peeve of mine, because we all have, like I said, strong opinions. And certain issues are hot button issues for us, you know, in almost any question that we consider. But I've seen so many hearings go off track because somebody's got a hot button issue, but that hot button issue isn't what the code says the case is supposed to be about, you know? And it's sometimes hard to reel the board back in then. And that's in the past, and in Putnam County for many, many years, a lot of these issues didn't get called out because, quite frankly, a lot of properties weren't of huge value. A lot of people who came before boards of planning commission, ZBOAs, or even county or city commission, the monetary value of the decision wasn't worth them moving on to appeal, or especially if it involved court. But times are changing in Putnam County, and people's principles and their willingness to, you know, to really stand on a principle when they want to develop or don't want development, you know, it's heightened. So the hope is that when this board acts, we build a record that's defensible. So that when if it goes to appeal, everybody's got a right to appeal. Certainly have no objection to that whatsoever. If you think you've been wrong, then that's your right to seek redress above. But our task would be to make sure we've built a record so that the appellate body can look at whatever was done and, you know, hopefully make a decision that you acted within the code and the discretion that's given you. So I guess that's my little soapbox presentation, but it's something that I guess it's a recurring issue that I've seen over the years. The things that I've just spoken of are recurring issues. And I've handled a number of appeals, I mean, as an attorney, over matters, and my wish is always that when I get into a case and read the transcript, I find where somebody launched into a long conversation and discussion about an issue that wasn't even one that was supposed to be considered in the question at hand, because that obviously allows me to argue that my client didn't get the benefit of due process because the panel was distracted and applied guidelines that weren't adopted by the legislative body. So it's something to keep in mind as you go through. And Ms. Walsh, and I'm sure the city attorney will try to keep you reminded of those facts. But it doesn't hurt if you're having a session like this at the beginning of a term, doesn't hurt to talk about it for a minute. So can I answer any questions?
Madam Chair. Okay. One of the things that struck me in looking at the sections in the ordinance under the criteria for decisions on the certificate of appropriateness is that I saw in two places in here where it mentioned including interior. For instance, in the 54-79A, general considerations in reviewing an application for a certificate of appropriateness, the board shall consider the design and appearance of the structure, including interior, front, sides, rear, and roof image. And my initial understanding was that the Historic Preservation Board they were looked to govern what was going on in the exterior of the home. And in two places in this ordinance, the word interior is mentioned, and that's one. And so when you talk about what, I know we can't bring anything before this body, that's done by the applicants to the city, and the city looks at things and bring things to this body as a board. But are we looking to address that in the ordinance at all, or is that something that if brought before us and someone has indications in their application that speaks to what changes they're making in the interior, are we then to consider that, or that's the question?
Well, I'll go back to try to follow my own advice, and that is, my advice is that whatever standard is established in the ordinance is a standard where to apply until and unless we change it. But I understand your concern. It would be my concern also. I mean, I guess philosophically, you can get into a great long discussion about the historic preservation requirements, but if the theme and theory of historic preservation regulations is to assure continuity and consistency of the exterior of properties within a historic district so that they remain consistent, then my personal philosophy is it shouldn't matter whether I use a wrought iron staircase inside my house when wood was maybe what was used at the time. But that's just me. I don't own property in a historic district, and I won't. Because I don't want somebody telling me what color I paint my house, or whether I use PVC fence if it looks good and holds up better than wood. But others do. And so that's just my personal thing. So Lisa, I'll leave it to you I'll admit I also was under the impression that primarily we're concerned about exterior features of a home. I didn't realize that the code directly asks you to look at interior features. So for instance, I guess my question to you for us to go forward with is, if someone wants to do interior renovations that aren't going to in any way, shape, or form be reflected on the outside of a home, are they required to come before the HPB to get a certificate of appropriateness for that?
In the strictest application of the code, yes. In the actual day-to-day operations, it's a whole lot of work, and we don't have staff for it.
And then that leads to, where's the limit? I mean, if I want to add a bedroom, move an interior, not load supporting wall, that kind of thing, I have to get who's to determine whether that's historically appropriate.
The overarching goal of the standards is to protect the historic resource and the integrity of that resource.
You said overreaching, that might be more appropriate.
Well, you might be right, but and so that's the intent of the code that I read.
I too think it's onerous and overreaching. And how do you police or monitor such a thing? I don't know that it's consistent with the overall state. That this seemed to be out of order to me. And actually, when I first saw it, I circled it and I thought these were errors and mistakes in here. But I was informed that no, that's actually how it reads. So I would prefer maybe I've got to do this on my own dime outside of this, is to pursue, well, should this be amended or get some advice on that? Because
I think it's
this
a
would
valid
be,
point.
this would be incredible for us to even handle if this became under our.
Could I ask a question to you or Lisa? And I could not be remembering correctly, but is a certificate of appropriateness used that you receive? Let's say a building that you just built and you redid the whole thing, and then you get a certificate of appropriateness to be able to move into the property.
No, ma'am, that's a certificate of occupancy.
Okay, thank you. I
Right.
got confused.
Yeah.
Because I
Certificate of-
The-
had the wrong terminology in there when they were including the inside and the out.
No, the certificate of appropriateness should be created prior to any work being done.
Okay, it was just, I had.
And I can, I'll explain the process that we go through for many of these cases. In the last case that you heard today is a good example. An applicant will go to Putnam County and apply for a building permit for a roof, put a new roof on. The staff at the county will say, oh, that's in the city and we think it's in the historic district. So then they send it to me. Normally, I wouldn't see a roof permit because it doesn't have anything to do with zoning requirements. It has more to do with building code requirements. But because it's in the historic district, they send it to me and I'll say, okay, it's in the historic district. Does this need a COA? And they won't act on that building permit application until they receive one, either approval or denial. So that is how we manage what we see so far. As far as interior renovations, I can certainly see some of the value in it in protecting the historic resource. For example, if you have a 2-story shotgun house and the stairway was off to one side or down through the middle, and moving that stairway then changes the character of the style of the house or structure.
But what it basically speaks to is it's inside their house. How would we know? Unless their neighbor ratted them out. And frankly, we have a hard enough time getting people to go through the correct procedure for things that can be seen from the road as it is.
Right, and that's where we were talking about the strictest application of the code versus the day-to-day application of it.
If
Miss,
the interior
Madam Chair?
renovations required a building permit, then, you would have that threshold of looking at the building permits, i.e. somebody applied for a permit to replumb, rewire, whatever, a house inside. And I guess theoretically, if the state chose to go down that path, then you could add that additional level. But as I said, I see that opening up a whole lot of issues. For one thing, I mean, if you want to get real technical with this, you can go from the old, what do they call it, post and whatever wiring, Miss Brenda, what is it? You know what I'm talking about?
Nothing to.
Yeah. Okay, so do I have to put that back instead of going with,
There was gas there.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I don't want to go there to my personal.
Madam Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
this is Valeria Thomas again. The city code has not been updated for several years, and that has been one of the issues that the present mayor have wanted to tackle. So that is something that we're going to move forward. We're looking at every aspect of the code, things that are applicable, things that we don't do anymore, things that we maybe should not have be included in the code. So that's a part of a process that we will be starting probably in this calendar year.
And Miss Thomas, did I understand that you're going to hang on and stay around until we get that finished?
And if it helps, Mr. Sheffield circled it for you.
I can't hear you. My system went out. I couldn't hear what you said, manager.
Yeah, I hear you. So anyway, is there anything else that I can ask for you?
Thank you very much. Thank you all very much. I feel that this has been very informative as a refresher to someone that's been on the board for a while, and certainly to our newer board members. Much appreciated.
Please feel free to call any one of us with questions.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Moving on to item 6 of our agenda, board comments. No. In that case, a motion to adjourn. All right, all in favor? And there we go. The motion passes and we are adjourned.